pleasure to be here. I will sit here, as always, on the far right. My name is Liel, Leibovitz, editor-at-large for Tablet Magazine, senior research fellow for the Hudson Institute. I'm here with three of my friends, esteemed colleagues, teachers, fine gentlemen who I'll present in sort of kind of chronological order. Best-selling author, philosopher king Lee Smith, tablet columnist and gentleman extraordinaire. Thank you, Lee, for joining us.
Thank you.
Lee apologizes. He would have to escape this swamp and go back to the free state of South Carolina, where he lives. So will Tony Badran, Tablet's news editor and Levant analyst, who also made good life choices and therefore lives in South Carolina. And so does Hudson Institute's own man in charge. His name is Mike Doran, Dr. Mike Doran, former government official, intellectual of the public and private variety. But on this panel, he requires that we refer to him as Big Dog. So we would do just that, reflecting his status on this panel. And so before we go any further, since it's always a good idea to start with current events, Lee Smith, yesterday, the nearest Middle Eastern country to America, Canada, thankfully lost the World Series. I know everyone here is very excited to talk about the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. I think this is the best World Series in about 50 years. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, it's a great World Series, fantastic. But, yesterday when I was at panel, we were talking about, and thankfully we're not in this precise position with Canada, but someday we're going to have to talk about the nuclear weapons programs of the United Kingdom and France. And but yeah, insofar as Canada is continuing to go the way of the Islamic Republic of Canada, they're probably going to lose baseball.
We're going to have to take baseball and probably basketball too.
No
they
doubt.
could keep hockey, but they haven't won that since 1992, I believe.
But it was a great World Series, and it was great. Yeah.
All right, now that we've gotten this out of the way, we have a lot to discuss, and at some point I do want to get this into a conversation. So here's how we will proceed. We will begin with sort of remarks on an identical question, the theme or topic of this year's panel: how has the Middle East changed since October 7th, which of course we could be spending weeks discussing that question alone. And then we would dive into all sorts of deep and dark corners, of which sadly there are many. But Big Dog, we will start with you.
I'm sorry. Okay. I wanted to go first for one reason, because I wanted to set an example
of how to do it.
Of how to follow my 5-year-old son's advice and wisdom that brevity is the soul of wit.
Well, if you could do that, then obviously we're going to let you go first.
Do you mind, Big Dog?
No. That's quite all right. As long as you make it clear that you didn't want to do that because you thought I wouldn't be brief.
No, that's precisely why I wanted to go first. So I thought because since you're a friend of Ruel, I thought I'd be in the same place again, rolling my eyes for 40 minutes and say, we got to get an airplane now. Obviously October 7th, but as I mentioned yesterday in the panel I was on, I think for Western governments, for the United States, for policy makers and policy experts, the real enormous change, the real big thing that happened after October 7th was to realize how weak and how brittle the Islamic Republic of Iran is, and that it should cause much reflection, as much, in fact, if not more than October 7th among Western policymakers, to see the extent to which we've been propping up these animals since 1979. It's very, very terrible. It's disgusting, in fact, that they were this easy to push over. They've caused this much trouble for the world order. They've caused this much trouble for the United States, and of course they are directly responsible for October 7th, and that these people were not stopped before, that they were not shot dead in their tracks. It's a terrible shame for the Western order, when the United States is still the leader of that. Thank God that Donald Trump sees things differently than generations of policymakers before them. But for me, that's the biggest thing. besides October 7th itself. The other things, I just want to give a very, very quick rundown. We were talking about this before on what I think is happening right now in the Middle East from the perspective of the Trump administration. You'll see a lot of people who are trying to say, oh, Trump actually hates Israel. He's skeptical of Israel. He hates Bibi, all this stuff. This is nonsense. Donald Trump has been very clear about how much he admires Benjamin Netanyahu. What's happening right now is I wrote an article for Tablet that came out Thursday. I explained the Trump administration sees things in terms of the China axis. All of these things are reflections of China. Iran, Russia is certainly a part of the China axis, so Russia-Ukraine is a part of the China problem. Venezuela, the drug boats, this is a part of the China problem, right? All of these things are part of the China problem. Tariffs, part of the China problem.
I'm interrupting your brevity and wit here. To sort of put a fine point on it, because one point that you make in the article is people tend to see our negotiations with China in terms of like, oh, this is primarily about a quote-unquote trade war.
Right.
And you say, no, this is actually about war, because here we are finding, American technologies bought by China and repurposed on, Iranian drones anywhere from Ukraine to...
Right, and October 7th it was used, American technology was used because the Chinese bought it. They passed it on to the Iranians who passed it on to their people. So the trade war, what we call the trade war, is both a component of a larger conflict with the People's Republic of China, but the trade war in a way is also the key to that war, because the way that Donald Trump sees it is that the trade imbalance, we've been running trade deficits with China even before China gained entry to the World Trade Organization in 2001. People talk about, oh, Taiwan's a real problem. Taiwan is a real problem. That would certainly weaken, if not collapse, the U.S. position in the Indo-Pacific theater. But the thing is, we have built the People's Liberation Army. That our trade deficit, or rather China's trade surplus with us, has built that military. So for people to get over-obsessed with Taiwan, it's like we have to fix the trade imbalance first, because there's no way keeping pace with it otherwise. And this is why, for Donald Trump, the trade imbalance and why tariffs are so important, why it's so crucial. And so when we're looking at the Middle East, I think it's very important. I think it's urgent for us to see the Middle East through the eyes of Donald Trump as part of a crucial theater, but in our larger conflict with China. That's, I think.
Tony, can you raise that, top that?
Well, I mean, to limit it to the Middle East, I guess, to return to the first point about the resetting reality, in a sense, because we had, so Lee talked about how we have the true nature and true strength of the Islamic Republic was revealed. And it was, I don't know if you're familiar with the spaghetti western Fistful of Dollars, right? So the conceit of A Fistful of Dollars is that there were two rival family gangs, essentially, in this Mexican town, the Rojos and the Baxters, right? And at face value, these two were equal, and they shared kind of the town. But when the Rojos decided that actually, no, we're not going to continue with this modus vivendi, they destroyed the family in one evening, right? So like they killed them all, right? So that balance that had existed in the Middle East for, let's say, the last 40 years at least, was inherently artificial because it was based on decisions that were made in Washington and in Jerusalem. Not on any actual balance of power. So all it took was 12 days, and basically that included the destruction of the entire command and control of Hezbollah, which people, especially in this town, had been writing manuscripts about its military power, and its not that it wasn't, not that it didn't have global extensions, not that it wasn't involved in the drug trade, not that it wasn't procuring missile and drone technology, et cetera, but the people basically drank the Kool-Aid as to what that actually meant. And it was all done, I mean, right? So and it probably would have been done a lot quicker had for instance, like, the Biden administration not intervened very specifically to protect Iranian assets from being destroyed much earlier. So so what we have now is kind of with the exception of Gaza, which I'm going to leave to Mike to address, by which I mean Big Dog, of course. But the Levant, which is the theater where, aside from the Iranian nuclear infrastructure that got destroyed entirely, the Levant was the theater where the Iranians built up their assets against Israel. And it's the case of Lebanon, I think, is very instructive here for what that reality reset that needs to continue would look like. And that is, and this is, by the way, against what most, even people in the Trump administration, want or aspire to achieve in Lebanon, which is some sort of a peace deal between Israel and Lebanon, which is hilarious. But the idea of what Israel does in the Levant is predicated on what the Levant is. And the Levant is that there are no actual states in the Levant. They're all fake buffer zones, essentially. And what Israel is doing now in Lebanon is that if anything in this military theater known as Lebanon pops its head, we will destroy it. And so that if that policy paradigm continues, then reality will have emerged victorious.
I am going to ask you to sort of dive a little bit deeper, because I think this point is very crucial. I think to a lot of people, not in this room, because everyone in this room obviously knows much better, but in this town, not known for its surplus of wisdom, especially when it comes to international affairs. The idea is like, what are you talking about? Of course, these are real countries, Tony. Lebanon, right. Syria. These are not, kind of like battlegrounds since the, Bronze Age for empires to sort of stage attacks against each other. These are, nations that we have to take seriously. So take 90 seconds and explain to us why we should disabuse ourselves of this notion.
So, I mean, ASMEA is fortunate because Alex Joffe is someone who goes back in this ancient period even more than what I know, by about a good 1,500 years, maybe. Than what? But basically, that entire geography going back to the Bronze Age had nothing, had no power center. The power centers were in Egypt, were in Anatolia, and Mesopotamia, and later in sort of, through Mesopotamia, what the Iranian plateau, right? This is where all civilization as we know it happened, right? Civilization and empires were based in those geographies. And then later in the West with Rome and Greece. So when those powers, in whatever configuration, north, south, east, west, went to battle against each other, went to war against each other, sometimes 3 at a time or 2 at a time, whatever. The place where they would fight is the Levant. So the Levant's function and nature, and this paradigm, this geographic paradigm, persisted from that through the Islamic period, and all the way to the modern period. And they would all fight in the Levant. They would create buffer zones. They would create zones of influence and balance. They would split the geography of the Levant in the middle, usually between them. One of the main manuscripts that we or textual evidence that we have from the late Bronze Age, after the Battle of Kadesh in modern-day Syria, is that splits literally, like halfway through Lebanon, for the Turks up north for the Egyptians to the south, right? And these are structural patterns that are instructive, that have survived the test of time, and that we will see in especially, and again, Big Dog will address this later, between Turkey and Israel, for instance, is a very meaningful paradigm that I think is actually becoming reality as we speak.
All right, so Dr. Dog, over to you. I'm assuming you eventually will get to Turkey, but please take Tony's provocation and begin in Gaza, which I assume many of us would like to ponder and think about what might or might not happen there.
With your permission, can I come to Gaza at the end? Just
as long as there's some Gaza in there, we're good.
Gaza. I'll end with Gaza for sure, because I'll just answer your question, your original question about since October 7th, how's everything changed, and I think there are two dynamics going on simultaneously. One is the decline of Iran, which everybody has mentioned, and the contest between the U.S. alliance system and Iran. Iran has been severely weakened, but it's not out of the game yet. And all indications are they're rebuilding. They're not seeking terms. Donald Trump, the Iranians themselves say that they won the war. And that they never accepted the ceasefire, which is kind of true. Not that they won the war, but it's kind of true that they didn't accept the ceasefire. Donald Trump imposed a ceasefire, and they went along with it, but they didn't formally accept it.
Basically like the Black Knight from Monty Python, right? Like, no, come on, fight, you coward. I may not have arms and legs.
I see it. I see them as a little bit more serious than that, because I was in Turkey during what we're now calling the 12-Day War, or Operation Midnight Hammer, or whatever it was, Rising Lion. And the Turks told me, and when I say the Turks, I'm talking about people around Erdogan, not just people on the street, that Iran was going to win the war because Iran was going to force Israel to shoot off all of its interceptors. So Israel's going to run through its interceptors, and then it was going to have to accept a ceasefire. That didn't happen, but the U.S. had to put 5 destroyers with interceptors in the Mediterranean, and we went through, in that 12-day period, 25% of our THAAD batteries, which takes 3 to 5 years to replenish. So we were actually severely discomfited by Iran's strategy. I think Iran did not win the war, but they took a toll, and they're aware that they did, and all of our allies are aware that they did. There's a China, Russia, Iran, North Korea combined strategy against our alliance system, and they are trying to make us expend a lot of very valuable resources so that China can be stronger against us in East Asia. So I do think that Iran lost, but it's not out of the game, and I'm expecting, and the fact that they are rebuilding or trying to rebuild is significant. I'm expecting them to rebuild their ballistic missile capability, and I'm expecting them to do that with Chinese Chinese assistance.
So Iran being a loser with an asterisk, I suppose Turkey is a winner with or without an asterisk.
Turkey's a huge winner, and that's the second. The second dynamic is that we're in a kind of contest for the post-Iran Middle East, although it's not post-Iran because Iran is still there, and so that dynamic is continuing. But all of the losses of Iran have created a lot of vacuums that are going to be filled, and the Turks, the Saudis, and the Israelis are all circling around each other like snarling dogs about what this is going to look like. And you can analyze that contest in a lot of different ways. One way is it's a contest over who's going to be the primary interlocutor with Donald Trump about the new order. Mohammed bin Salman and Recep Tayyip Erdogan watch Netanyahu come to Washington 4 times, is it now? I've lost count. And it's not just that he comes and has a meeting with Trump. He came he came and stayed for the better part of a week and had multiple meetings with Trump. No other leader can, to Lee's point that they have very good relations, no other leader in the world can say that they had that kind of access to Trump. So there's this contest going on, and I think the Turks are the leaders of they're the big winners of the Israel-Iran contest because they picked up a lot of influence in Syria, and their influence around the region is growing. And then, with regard to Tony's question, from an American point of view, the two, I think, strategic priorities are continue the pressure on Iran, don't let it rebuild so that it can be an asset to China, continue to be an asset to China, and second, keep Turkey and Israel from going to war, because increasingly the Turks are defining Israel as the other, and and as the immoral other, and Turkey as the voice of morality in the world. I think Turkey is not simply an ideological actor. They have a lot of practical concerns, but that ideology is increasingly apparent among the Turks. And I don't think it's just Erdogan. The CHP, the secular party, their attitude toward Israel is like the attitude of the Irish, left-wing Europeans. And increasingly, there's also the new Welfare Party, which is an Islamist party, which is attacking Erdogan on the right. Their view is like Iran's view, basically. And even the MHP, the secular nationalist pan-Turkist party, traditionally more inclined to like Israel, is highly critical of Israel. So I think even if Erdogan were to leave the scene, the tension between Israel and Turkey is going to be an aspect of the Middle East for the next 5-10 years.
Now you
promised,
at least you promised us Gaza will collect in a bit.
Okay.
But you presented this really good image of at least three actors sort of running around each other like snarling dogs, trying to Turkey, Saudi, Israel, trying to kind of grab their morsel, their piece to be the person or the party that shapes the future. And so, Tony, I have a very good idea. How about everyone joins the Abraham Accords? How about we bring Syria and you're a very big lover of the Abraham Accords. And now, on a serious note, there are people, including some serious people, who think, yes, this is the way, this is the path, this is the future. You and Lee and Mike and everyone on this panel have been very early in warning against this absolute unmitigated disaster. So tell us, please, why should we dismantle the Abraham Accords?
Right. So the Abraham Accords were built at the time in the first Trump term as a corrective to Barack Obama's alignment with Iran. Right. So what the Abraham Accords was supposed to do were two things. One is to gather all the players in the American alliance system on one side, draw a line in the sand, and say there's an American alliance here, and the Iranians are opposite that. We are not aligning with the Iranians. We're not going to be sharing. The Iranians are not going to be the primary interlocutor with the United States in the region, right? So that was the first thing. And the second thing is we're going to remove the Palestinians as the center, sort of the central organizing principle of how Washington approaches the region. That the Palestinian holding everything hostage actually advances the Iranian position and not vice versa. So at the time, coming out of the Obama years, that was a very important step forward, and so they were very much historic in that sense. Immediately thereafter, the Biden administration goes on to reverse all of that. They continue to talk about it, not necessarily using the Abraham Accords terminology. They called it regional integration is the word the term they came up with. And then they recentered the Palestinians on it while resuming the realignment with Iran. So they kept the shell of the Abraham Accords, but now it became subversive. It became something to serve the opposite intent of what it was initially devised to do. Where we stand now is that we stand on the ruins of Iranian power in the region, which prompts, number one, which prompts the question is, like, okay, well, who cares about the Abraham Accords in this context? When Israel has shown itself as the principal enforcer of the American order in the region, what point is there to, I mean, the president has spoken about it in terms of tribute, that now everyone should come and pay tribute to this new victorious American order in the region. The problem is that tribute cannot be that Israel has to pay something, and the tribute cannot mean that we recenter the Palestinians, because that means that now we're going back to the Obama framework. The problem is that all the Arab, mainly the Saudis right now, are all insisting on the Palestinian thing in the middle. So that becomes with Gaza now, and the day after scenarios for Gaza, that becomes a very serious danger that we now use what is at face value a pro-Israel, pro-American framework to actually constrain and undercut the one actor that actually helped reshape the regional balance of power in the Americans' favor. So as a result of that, I actually think that at this point, not only are they irrelevant, but they are potentially counterproductive.
Lee, do people in Trump's White House understand this? What is their view of the region as far as you could tell, in light of the last few weeks?
I don't know. I mean, one of the things that we've seen, everyone is very concerned. Everyone was very concerned about what is Steve Witkoff doing, what does he know, what does he understand. There's all these different relationships with Qatar. Then it became clearer and clearer that Steve Witkoff is President Donald Trump's envoy, and what he believes in is what Donald Trump believes in. He represents Donald Trump. So I think that the most important thing is that it's Donald Trump has the final say. Does Donald Trump care about the Abraham Accords? No, I think he thinks that they're a beautiful thing hanging behind him on his trophy wall. And if this is a way to get the Saudis to pay someone more, and a way to, I mean, does Bibi Netanyahu want normalization with Saudi? I mean, for me, I think it's kind of a gross idea. I mean, I don't understand, but finally, the guardian of the two holy shrines has recognized the Jewish state. I don't know. I mean, is that an upside, or is it irrelevant? I think it's frankly irrelevant. But I don't know if Donald Trump wants this for. A lot of people talk about how Donald Trump really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. I think at this point, Donald Trump understands that large, significant parts of the global establishment are against him, and the chances of him getting a peace prize are rare. So I don't really think that's what he's going for. Again, I think the main thing is to try to get all of this stuff out of the way. We were talking about this a bit before. It's one of the conventions of Washington, and it's meant to, or it has been in some hands meant to stop the Trump administration from doing anything about Iran or about Gaza, saying, oh, no, if you do this, you're helping the Chinese. No, what Donald Trump has been doing is attacking and dismantling China's position. But he is also in a hurry to clear all of this stuff off of his desk so he can focus on China. Because there is something to be said for the fact that China likes a lot of hot spots around the world to distract the United States from paying attention to China.
And yet, as we've seen, with more clarity this week than perhaps ever before, there is a not insignificant and growing contingency on the right that is trying to use Israel specifically to sort of foil the president's successful approach.
I think Big Dog has I think the stuff that Mike has written on social media has been so instructive and so detailed. And social media is not always the place where you get detail and insight. But Mike's been really great on that, and I'm really glad that you asked that question, so we get to open it up. But I would love to hear Mike talk about it, if that's okay. I'm deflecting it to the big dog. Teeing it up for the big dog.
Please.
Not the big dog, but big dog.
Over to our Senior Heritage Foundation correspondent, Mike Doran.
Can I talk about Gaza, or do I have to go right to Heritage Foundation?
We have reached a point in the narrative when Gaza is the non-controversial
Gaza is
feel-good subject.
appealing.
But okay, no, you may not. You will get to Gaza later.
Okay,
we're talking.
Gaza. We're gonna. Okay.
Tucker Carlson it away, please.
So no, it's one of the remarkable things about the Trump administration. There's so many paradoxes about Donald Trump, and this is one of them that. Trump has a vision. I think he's got a vision of America, and I think he's got a vision of the electoral coalition that is going to realize his vision of America. And central to that vision was attacking transnational progressivism, and he put together a coalition that could attack it here at home, which meant getting rid of DEI and BDS, and getting rid of all of the tentifadas on the elite American campuses. And he also envisions an American order in the Middle East in which Israel is the major partner of the United States in pushing back against the revisionist alignment of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And yet, you look in vain for a either official spokesman for Trump or an unofficial mouthpiece that puts that vision clearly in front of the in front of the public. I agree with Lee's analysis, or I find it compelling, I guess I would say, of what Donald Trump is trying to do, how he sees the Middle East in the context of China, and how he wants to tamp down all of these hotspots because they give China leverage over us. But I don't see Trump saying that very clearly. I don't see Steve Witkoff saying it very clearly. And then privileged MAGA spokespeople like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, they are actually attacking him on this. They're attacking him on his alliance with Israel. They are sowing dissension domestically among the elements of the coalition against transnational progressivism. So Tucker Carlson came out this last week and said that he hates no one more than evangelical Christians and Mike Huckabee because they're Israel first, not America first. And so it's kind of a paradox that I think it's pretty clear that Trump has this vision that we are ascribing to him, but yet the people who are there to defend him domestically against his domestic enemies are not presenting that picture. On the contrary, they're fighting against it. And then we saw what we saw at Heritage, where Kevin Roberts supported Tucker Carlson after he platformed Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is such a disgusting scumbag, and such an insignificant person. Why would anyone want to be associated with him? And why would anyone find it controversial that Tucker Carlson would be criticized for having such a person on a show? And after a long string of degenerates that he's had on his show, the key thing here is that this is Washington. I mean, the effort was these guys like Nick Fuentes. We can't deplatform them in general because of the rise of social media. They have found their audience. Their audience is willing to pay for them, and so they can make an income spreading this bile. But to bring it into heritage and to give it a stamp of approval from a respected conservative think tank is a whole nother level. And so this fight, I think, is very, very meaningful, and it's important that we win it.
I mean, to take it even a step darker, here is a vice president of the United States sitting with Tucker Carlson a few steps from the Oval Office and basically relitigating the Iran policy, not just in theory, but after the president had already acted and was proven completely right. That strikes me as more than just kind of petty politics. It strikes me as sort of a beginning of a rift in, call it the Trump doctrine. How worried should we be about this? This is open to anyone.
I wouldn't go that. May I? I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't go that far, because I don't know that J.D. Vance is making any of these arguments behind closed doors, but in his signaling toward Trump world, toward MAGA world, he's showing, through a number of different things, his the emphasis he put on going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre rather than going to the wall. The interview he gave, the interview that he hosted with Tucker Carlson after the death of the murder of Charlie Kirk, and so on. He's playing to that wing of MAGA. To what extent it's actually influencing his view of the Middle East and relations with Israel, I'm not really sure about that. But it's a flirtation that should worry us.
There is one possibility to see how that might play out, not with what has already been accomplished, which is, as you mentioned, I mean, the Iran stuff is already done, right? The daily destruction of Hezbollah capabilities in Lebanon is ongoing. Nobody's pushing against that in the administration. While we're trying to mitigate the relationship with Syria, nobody has asked Israel necessarily to withdraw from Mount Hermon and all these things.
That's exactly
right. But there is one arena, which is Gaza, where this can become potentially a problem, because they are moving to try to create this ridiculous notion of an international security force, which is going to be this ridiculous mishmash of competing rival powers.
Which works very well in Lebanon, we should say.
Which works everywhere really well. I mean, it's ridiculous. Whenever you put these guys, I mean, they are the mix of regional Muslim states on the one hand with the Palestinian, right, with the Palestinians. Those two things, whenever you mix them together, that means basically the modern history of the Middle East, which is constant rivalry and violent proxy wars, right? So now you're bringing all of that and you're putting it right on Israel's doorstep in Gaza, which essentially was always a Democrat wet dream, right? That you bring in and then you position the United States on all of these borders, Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. You position the United States as a buffer between Israel and its military priorities and imperatives, right? So that is the thing is not, we may not necessarily worry about it under the Trump administration, but that's just going to last 3 years, right? And then who's going to pick it up? That's the big question. And how do those people then repurpose this scaffolding and infrastructure that's been put in place in Lebanon, which is, remember, the agreement in Lebanon was put in place by Amos Hochstein, by the Biden team, right? And it was put in place very specifically to constrain Israel, not to give it a free hand. Same thing, we'll see what happens in Syria.
Making, of course, the distinction between Lebanon and Hezbollah, those I hear are two totally different things.
Right. Now, there is still, there's a mess with Tom Barak and Lebanon, because he speaks in kind of contradictory registers on Lebanon. I don't know if he understands that he's being contradictory, but it is contradictory. On the one hand, it's like, well, this is just, these people are nonsense. There's no state there, blah, blah, blah. Then on the other hand, which is why we really must pay them a lot of money and try to get them to sign peace with Israel. Okay. In Syria, it's not as obvious yet, if there's going to be a problem. But Gaza, especially when you have a continued Israeli military presence in about 50% of Gaza. Then introducing sort of this American infrastructure and international forces, whatever, I just see that as a headache that's just waiting to happen down the road.
All right, let's solve Gaza then. Lee.
Well, not about Gaza. I just want to say another way to. I think that big dog, and especially laid out the structure of what's happening, the arguments over the internal divisions over Trump's foreign policy. I think if there's a way to bracket the Jew hate, which is what it is from Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and all this stuff, there's a way to do that. And if you look at what Tony's talking about and what Mike is talking about in terms of the policy, it's a different way to see the Trump administration. What we're seeing, and you kind of hinted at this, is what we're seeing is 3 years, and that's it. What we're seeing is 3 years for this president, not the administration, though there are people who are on his side in this administration. But what we see is a window lasting 3 years, because after that, what we're getting a taste of is, this is one of the ridiculous things. The guy who's the head at Heritage saying, oh, we're the anti-globalist, America first. Like, there is the signature globalist position is anti-Israel. It's like, that's it. That's what they all agree across the board, all of them. China has problems with the climate stuff because China is the biggest scoundrel when it talks that anti-Israel is the signature position. So what we're seeing is, in this country, right and left. There are exceptions. We see in the Senate, we see Ted Cruz, we see Tom Cotton, we see Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So there are lots of people. But really, if it's not just the rising Jew hate on the right, matching the Obama faction, the dominant faction on the left, it's also like, wow, you see how small that Trump window is and what that means for American foreign policy, not just in terms of the Middle East, but generally. You can see it in terms of China. You can see it in terms of, that's what I think they're doing. Everyone wants to wait out Trump now, not just China. Everyone just wants to see it go back to normal for their perspective, normal after these 3 years. So in a sense, I think we're also being played a little bit by what's happening at Heritage. It's like, oh, and we are righteously enraged about the disgusting language coming out of these people. It's disgusting, and the stupid ideas, the cowardice. But that is also obscuring the fact there's something else going on here about our national security that's being hidden.
Because I know you have a plane to catch, I want to jump right into this, because that is actually a hard concept to understand. You have an amazing new book, which everyone, as soon as we're done here, will purchase. And it is in large part about, decades and decades of an entire kind of, call it, for lack of a better term, elite that became totally enamored and enmeshed with this idea of China endangering American interests and national security in a very kind of blunt, blatant manner. Walk us through, I know this is literally a subject that could and does fill a wonderful book, but walk us through how that happens and why the return to this modus vivendi is so dangerous.
Well, how about this? How about I'll put in the context of the Middle East. That Kissinger and Nixon and Kissinger are given credit for this grand geopolitical move in 1972 that would use the Chinese as leverage against the Russians. Well, that's not what happened, because they were both very confused, especially Kissinger, who was the idea guy, what they meant by balance of power. What they really meant was drawing the other two major nuclear powers into a concert system along with the United States, which meant basically neutering everyone, right? It was the nuclear age. They were worried by this. And that's what they did. And to do that, they had to make assurances to the Chinese. And that's been the real U.S.-China relationship for 50 years. What happened at the beginning was not meant to crush the Soviets or weaken the Soviets. It was meant to put all three major players in stasis so that there wouldn't be nuclear exchanges. So the whole Kissinger-Nixon myth it's myth, but it makes sense it's told like this because of all the institutions in Washington that defend the heroic story of Nixon and Kissinger. The reason that this the reason that this is relevant for the Middle East is because, well, these two guys wrote more about the Iran deal than anyone else, and it was both Mike and Tony who explained what the Iran deal really was about. And if you look at what Kissinger did, the idea of bringing the U.S. into a concert system, that meant weakening the United States. This is what happened with the Iran deal too. Obama's geopolitical equilibrium, right? Everyone was like, I don't understand. Why would you give your adversary, or why would you give your adversary a nuclear bomb? And Obama, I think we all agree that Barack Obama was a bad actor. But if you give him just the least bit of credit as someone who believed he was an intellectual heavyweight, his idea was to, this is the phrase, geopolitical equilibrium, was to balance off these different players. And the only way to balance off of what he perceived to be the most disruptive force in the region, which is Israel, was to ensure that Iran had to have the bomb. There was no way Iran couldn't have the bomb. Without it, it could not balance Israel. So his thinking was totally in line with Kissinger's. Where Kissinger specifically weakened the United States, Obama weakened the United States by proxy through our ally Israel. So I think that's why but thanks for bringing it up, Liel, but I think that's one of the things that helps us understand the Kissinger thing it's shaped not just our idea of China, but it's shaped American foreign policy thinking for half a century. It's Big Dog who gave Obama most credit. I think among the four of us here at this table, I think that Tony and I were probably more disposed to say, yeah, no, he's just a bad actor doing this and that. I think Mike actually saw a strategic rationale for it, and so just thinking more about Kissinger, I think Mike is right. Right, he really actually thought wasn't this your case?
Yeah. But that, so just to tie this with what you said earlier about everyone waiting to go back to normal, what is the normal? Obama is the normal, right? So the normal in this case, when you're seeing people on the right in basically the Koch brother world with all that is aligned with the kind of the Tucker faction, all of these people, Bannon, all of these guys are talking in the same language, which is Obama language, about the need to constrain Israel, to hands off Iran, using the Turks to tie Israel's hands, using American aid to constrain Israel.
Obama language, Kissinger thinking. Right. That's one of the things that struck me so much. Like, wow, this has been going on for so long.
Right.
So when we talk about what a rupture Trump represents, it's really profound. Mm-hmm. And yes, this is the great fear that after Trump, everything will go back to the way it was with China, with Iran, and the real actual basis of U.S. foreign policy, the way it should be, will be lost, and we'll return to Obama language and Kissinger thinking.
It's kind of an astonishing and yet very well-founded fear, because from a total sort of neophyte perspective, how can you see the last 2 years, and more specifically Trump's use of American power, and not understand that something was very broken about your perception of reality? Dr. Doug.
I don't know. Can I talk about Gaza?
I'd love for you to actually talk about Gaza.
No, I don't understand. I don't understand what's in the mind of Tucker Carlson or Steve Bannon. We've had so much evidence over the last decade of China's malintent, their military rise, the leverage that they have over us in supply chains, the penetration of all of our national security institutions, penetration of our universities, the taking of our scientific knowledge, promotion of woke ideology among our liberal arts students, and then while stealing our scientific achievements, on and on and on and on and on, and that was the theme of the first Trump administration. And lo and behold, in Trump 2, what are these guys saying? The Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. I mean, all I can do is say that vector leads to very bad news, but I don't understand the thinking behind it.
We have just a few more minutes with Tony and Lee. We would, Big Dog and myself would remain here and hopefully turn this into a conversation. But I can't end this panel officially without addressing Gaza. And so would someone please?
So I agreed with what Tony basically said in one sentence is the Israelis have agreed and with American encouragement or pressure to internationalize Gaza, and historically opposing internationalization of Gaza had been a centerpiece of their policy, and they don't want to internationalize Gaza for all the reasons that have not historically want to internationalize Gaza for all the reasons that Tony said. I still think that there are some major steps that have to take place before Gaza is actually internationalized. The Trump peace plan that everyone accepted has two parts to it. You know, the first part was ceasefire, hostage for prisoner exchange. Israel pulls back slightly, and then more humanitarian aid flows in. We're at the end of stage one. We don't have all the hostages out because the dead hostages are still Hamas is holding on to. But phase two is very conceptual. Disarmament of Hamas and the international stabilization forces is inserted, and all of these, what the scenario is by which Hamas disarms, and how the who's going to be in the international stabilization force, and how they are going to actually work on the ground is really very, very unclear. And the only reason that we have this agreement is because Donald Trump twisted everybody's arms to agree to it. But everyone's version, because it's so conceptual, everyone's version is actually quite different. The Turkish version, the Emirati version, the Saudi version, the Israeli version, the Jordanian version, they're all very, very different. The Egyptians, of course. And I don't know how we get to the point where they actually agree on the practicalities. For the very simple reason, sorry.
No, forgetting the practicalities for a second, I want to kind of linger on this because perception is obviously very important here. What do we think? Has Israel won this, lost this, ended up somewhere in the middle?
I don't think it's over. I think it's still going on, and I'll be surprised if we ever have an international stabilization force actually on the ground. From an Arab point of view, if you just look at it from an Egyptian point of view, there are two things missing from the equation. More than two, but two things right immediately. One is a legal framework for Egyptian forces to be involved, and the second is a political framework for forces to be involved. If you're the Egyptians or anyone, Jordanians, Emiratis, whoever, and you send your troops to go stabilize Gaza right now under these conditions without a UN resolution and without a vision of what the Biden administration always called the day after is going to be, then you're open to the accusation that your troops are the action arm of Bibi Netanyahu's Greater Israel program. And whether we think that this is a reasonable accusation or not, it's a serious one in Arab politics, and it's an untenable position for any Arab regime to be in. The only reason they're going along with it right now is because Donald Trump says go along with it, go along with it, go along with it, and they don't want to say no to Trump, but they don't actually want to do it. They don't, and Israel is going to maintain overall security control. So look at what the Israelis are doing in Judea and Samaria. If you're an Egyptian policeman on the ground in Gaza and the Israelis see some kind of terrorist activity and they come in and they hit a terrorist cell and they end up killing an Egyptian policeman, like they killed a Qatari security guard in Doha, that's a major crisis in Egyptian-Israeli relations, which they don't want to. They can see that, way ahead of time, and they don't want to be involved in that. And you can't also imagine an Egyptian soldier pointing a gun at a Hamas terrorist and say, "Drop your gun," and forcing Hamas to give up its weapons. We're seeing the same thing play out in Lebanon. The Lebanese government and the Lebanese armed forces are not going to disarm Hezbollah. The only element in the world that is going to actually disarm Hamas is the IDF. But it was interesting. This week, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we have two goals in Gaza: disarming Hamas and not falling out with the Americans over it. And so that's what he's juggling. Everyone, all the Arab regimes are juggling the same consideration.
Before we turn this into a conversation and bid adieu to the two gentlemen from Charleston, I would like to end, as is customary in America, though not in Canada, on a hopeful note, and have each of you, starting with you, Lee, give us. You could absolutely. You could finish with a land recognition if you would like. Lee Smith, something to be we've discussed a lot of troubling, dark, ominous trends here. Give us a ray of sunshine, my man.
Well, I mean, I think that we saw one over the last week. I think that Americans on the right anyway, and I don't even describe them on the right, I just describe people who love this country. They saw what happened when there was a faction among them who are promoting Jew hate and larger division, and are also attacking the Republican Party. And people stood up about this vocally. And so when people say, "Oh yeah, we're going to fall prey to the same thing as the left," like, as it turns out, we haven't. As it turns out, people are outraged, and people are willing to fight about it, and people are willing to make their names known, and they're willing to take on some, not just people who are heavy hitters, but some very nasty and ugly people who've already done some very nasty and ugly things and have gotten people badly hurt. So I think that's enormously impressive. Jews, evangelicals, Christian Zionists, supporters of Israel. I mean, people have been worried for a while how this is going to go down. I think we see how it's going to go down, and I think that's just so fantastic and something so courageous, so awesome to celebrate. And these are just the people who are on.
How's it going to go down?
Oh, I think they're going to get crushed. I think they're going to be crushed. I think the Jew hate faction is being crushed as it is now, and we need to see some people pay a very steep price for this. Because I'll just say very quickly, which you were talking about. I'll try to keep it very quick. The problem isn't just that these people were supporting Tucker Carlson. The problem is they paid for the infrastructure. They paid for the Jew hate infrastructure. And then they come back around and they say, well, we have to pay attention to these young people who have different ideas from some of the older evangelicals. There seems to be some division. And we mustn't cancel our other people. We must listen to them. You paid for it. You did it. You set the fire. And now you're telling us that there's no way to put it out, and we have to listen to them, and we have to watch it all burn down. That's what they said this week. And everyone else said, go to hell. Go to hell. You're going to pay. We want your head. You're going to pay. We're not going to stop until we have your head. That's it. So, from my perspective, wow, this is fantastic. And these aren't even the people, most of the country, most evangelicals, Christian Zionists and Jews aren't on Twitter. They're not melting their brain on this garbage on social media. They have decent lives, they have decent families, and decent friends. God forbid they should ever know what's happening in that cesspool known as Twitter or TikTok. They'd lose their minds, and they will. right? But look at the people who still are on social media and what they did. Wow, awesome. Heads are going to roll at good, and as many as possible. Let them be scared. Let them be worried. Let them be impoverished. So that's awesome what happened this week.
This is Lee Smith when you ask him to be optimistic.
Oh, it was great. You're telling me it's not? It was beautiful.
Oh, I think it's terrific. Tony.
Oh, I can't top that. So.
So you're signing on to that.
I'm signing off to the big dog.
I know I've been out crescendoed here. I'm reasonably optimistic. I think it's a pretty. There's a good news story here. For the first time in history, Israel and the United States went to war together. That was always a red line for previous American administrations. Donald Trump has created a new model of the alliance between the U.S. and Israel, where Israel is the action arm. He pulled back from it a little bit after the failure of the Qatari operation and the outrage that he got from the Qataris and the Saudis and the Emiratis. I looked at the Saudi feint toward Pakistan with the defense agreement with Pakistan. I look at that as a way for the Saudis to pressure the United States to give the security guarantee that they've been looking for anyway. It has nothing to do with Israel, really. It was just a convenient moment. But it was kind of interesting what they did, because Pakistan is a proxy of China, so it was a way of saying, if we don't get this security guarantee, we have other options. But they all want the relationship with Washington. That's the most important thing to them. And I think we're in a much better situation than we were just a year ago. So there's always problems that we can identify, and some of them, like the rise of anti-Semitism on the right, is really disturbing to see. But if you factor everything all together and you think about where we were a year ago, I think it's a pretty good news, pretty good story.
I would say one thing is like the satisfaction is that all these people who are trying to kind of fake triumphalism in that they're the ascendant faction. These people, when you actually check the record, I mean, these people are actually across the board uber losers. They're all losers. They've lost on every single one of the policies. They've lost on China. They've lost on Russia. They've lost on Venezuela and South America in general. They've lost on Iran. They've lost on Israel. They've lost every single thing that they claim to be, that they were the voice of Trump's policy. Across the board, they were wiped out. They're all, the president took the exact opposite. And so the people that are actually standing up and parading their loserdom is, I think, cause for celebration.
Their position's totally incoherent. I mean, I got such amusement at Steve Bannon's latest policy pronouncement about the Middle East, because he wants a three-state solution, because we're going to have a Christian state in Jerusalem. And it's funny, because the whole supposed rationale for opposing the Midnight Hammer and advising Trump to distance himself from Israel was that we are overextended, and we have to retrench, and we have to focus on East Asia, and we can't get involved in any of these projects in the Middle East. And now he has a new imperial project. We're going to make a Christian state in Jerusalem.
I hope someone's paying for that. We need someone to do an investigation. Oh, the Knights Templar are paying for that? Fascinating. What a phenomenal information opportunity. The Knights Templar, huh?
Traditionally, the mention of the Knights Templar
How's
is
he
the
gonna set up-
opportunity to
how's he-
thank.
We're the Knights of Columbus on this one.
He's also pushing this.
They got to get to the airport. You and I are remaining here. Let us have a round of applause for
Thank
Tony
you
and
so
Lee.
much.
Thank you
Thank you, guys.